Hello, everyone, and welcome to our end-of-year procedures workshop. My name is Josh Hutchings, and I am joined today with one of our other fantastic trainers, Seneca Ramirez, and we are going to be your guides into the journey of the wonderful experience of closing up your library now that the school year is nearing a close. Our goal today is to get you guys some initial information that's going to help you create a plan for how your end of year is going to look. We unfortunately can't be as comprehensive as we would like. There's just too many possible things that a person could go through for the end of year, but hopefully we'll give you some good ideas to start you off and just get those creative juices flowing so that you can begin to create your own plan. All right, and here's our agenda today. We're going to be talking specifically about why should you have end of year procedures, the theory, the purpose. We'll be moving on to talking about what to do with those items in your collection and closing up for the end of the year with those. Moving on to patrons and what to do with those guys. And then lastly, we'll be talking about backing up your data. We'll have moments for open Q&A sessions throughout. So please do feel free to submit all your questions to Seneca here. She'll be kind of manning our Q&A. She will be taking care of the smaller ones, but also passing the bigger ones on to me that she feels we should all be hearing together. So we have disabled chat, so any questions you do have, do make sure that you put through the Q&A. Also, as a small notice here, if you do have to leave early or you're coming in a little late, you will be able to have this sent to you via email as long as you signed up for the webinar as a recording. So that way you can go back and you can review any of the things we talk about today. So if you miss a little something, don't worry, you can always review. So, all right, so kind of moving on, we're gonna go ahead and start off with why should you have end of year procedures? End of year procedures give you the opportunity to be able to prepare your collection for the next year, essentially. And there are a number of things that become involved in that process. I'm sure we've all ran into it. A student comes up to us, they found a book in the catalog, and they say, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, where's this book? I can't find it on the shelf. Oh, it somehow went missing. End of year procedures help to take care of a process like that. You've got inventory in place and other shelf cleaning tips to use. Or a situation where you run a report and, oh my gosh, there's a graduated student on my report from last year and I don't want him on there. That's our goal today, is to talk about how to clear that kind of stuff up and help you get prepared for it. All right, now most important, before you start your end of year procedures, create a plan. Look at all the things that are in your collection that you want to make sure are cleaned up. I'm sure you've noticed things throughout the year. We'll talk about specifics here as we go along, but a plan is incredibly important. That way you know that you followed exactly what you want, you can check it off, because sometimes end of year procedures can be big projects, such as inventory, a huge one, and you don't want to forget other things that are as important as you're going along. Some of the Alexandria resources that are available to you for these end of year procedures, of course, you've always got your 24/7 customer support team. So as you're creating that plan, don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. Also, I don't know how often you pop under the question mark up at the top right of your program, but if you click that and go to our support center, and then once you're there, make sure you click the little logo up at the top left that says Comp Wiki. That'll take you to the main page of the support center. Here you'll see we have a bunch of documentation, including beginning of your procedure things. So, and what we'll be doing for you folks is we'll be sending out in our FAQ that will go along with the recorded webinar, we'll be sending out links to a lot of the helpful things you'll be looking for as you're going to be using the program for end of year procedures. So look for that, because that'll be helpful. And then last but not least, performing inventory, a huge and important part of your end of year procedure process. We are not going to be able to talk about it in full today, just because it can be such a big, complex concept. And I've just brought up the inventory manager just for reference. However, we did release an inventory workshop last month, and we are also going to include links to that so that you guys will be able to find that in our FAQ and get to it quickly. So make sure you watch that so you can get more of a heads up about how inventory should work for you. All right? Okay, so kind of moving on. What to do with those items in your collection. We're going to start off by talking about end of year reports. Then we're going to move on to preferences. and talk about the importance of hard due dates and period due dates and getting those updated. And then we're also going to be talking about removing items from your collection you no longer want. So to start off with, I'm going to go ahead and open up the report screen. So starting off in circulation here. I'm going to pop to Tools and then go to Reports. And under Reports, I'm going to go ahead and show us lost and discarded reports. So we're starting off, you'll see under Special here. Sorry. It's my Wednesday too, guys. It's under circulation. I do apologize. And then under circulation, you'll see if you click the little arrow to the left, you'll get a special items list option down at the bottom there. And the reason I'm directing you to these reports is come the end of the year, you've probably been putting items into lost or discarded throughout the year. And most folks do want to actually have some kind of list of those items that have gone into lost or discarded so that they can either replace them or account for them financially. And then eventually you're going to remove them. So sometimes it's nice to have a list of those available to you. Now you'll see you've got a list of all the different types of reports that are related to the status types in the system, lost copies and discarded copies being both those right there. So, and if you are moving items to lost from inventory and you only want to see the ones that went into lost from patrons, do make sure to deselect or select depending on what that will be. Folks will oftentimes run this after inventory too, so they have just a list of those lost items, but there are inventory specific reports as well. All right, other reports that you're going to be looking at come the end of the year to account for your items generally can tend to be usage reports. And usage can be a little confusing because there are a few different types of usage reports in the system. Just to explain, I'm going to open up our title section, our copies section, and our statistics section. And you'll see there is a usage that is specific to titles, copies, and also usage related to statistics. Title usage refers mainly to your single title that you would have. You know, that's all the mark record information. Sometimes it will show somewhat copy-oriented info. Copy usage reports, they will show you the breakdown of all those numbers for each and every hard copy you have in the collection. And statistics, they give you the ability to customize what kind of usage reports you want to see. And statistics aren't just for the end of the year, as are the other usage reports. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about statistics and how to set those up right now so that you can benefit from having more setup. All right, so I'm going to pop under Edit here and Preferences. And under Preferences, I'm going to go ahead and pop under our policies here. Now those stat groups or statistics groups, you will see are specific to each one of the policies that you have in the program, respective to items and also patrons. So if I was to go to one of my other patron policies, you'll see I have a unique statistics group based on that. When items are checked out, checked in, and other functions are performed for these items or patrons, numbers will actually begin to be accrued based on these statistics groups. So you're collecting actual unique numbers and usage information based on what you have prepared beforehand. Now, for folks who think they would like to get more customized usage information, this is a great way to go. I would say get in, set one or two up and play with it. Check some things out under a statistics group, run some reports that you think you might like, and if you've kind of locked down your thinking around it, then you can begin to branch it out to other stat groups. If you have any questions, of course, give us a call. I understand that can be kind of complex. So now moving on from that, let's go ahead and talk about our hard due dates versus our period due dates. Now, hard due dates, for those of you who don't know, are included under the policies here for items. It's this option right here. A hard due date versus a period due date. A hard due date is basically a cap or an override. So anything that you try to check out, it will automatically move it to that hard due date, no matter what day you check it out on. And that's throughout the whole year. A period due date, which can be found under the calendar, and I'm going to pop us out here and go to our calendars. They can be set up for a specific day by clicking twice on the day in the calendar. Period due dates work great if you've got an upcoming break or vacation or some period of time where you're wanting the period due date not to override your transaction periods, but to just cap the transaction periods. So say, for example, if I have a 1-week checkout time period and I check a book out on Monday the 29th, I will still have that same checkout week. But if I check it out on the 6th, it will only give me 3 days for my transaction period because that period due date will cap it, as opposed to the hard due date, which will force it to the hard due date no matter what. So these are very important to update come the end of the year. I'm sure you've got a few in there. And if you don't, maybe consider using them to make your job a little easier so that you can avoid, talking to people about a lot of stuff you don't need to. All right. And then last but not least, we're going to move on to permanently removing items. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and pop back over here to our circulation screen. And under circulation, I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to go to Utilities. And where this comes in handy, it can be for those lost or discarded items we talked about earlier. It can also be for inventory, which is a more involved process, as we've already stated, so something to consider as that whole process. But if you're just wanting to get to the end of the year and get rid of all those lost or discarded items, there's a few ways you can go about that. If you look under Copies, since you are going to be removing copies, it's under that section, you'll see we have 2 specific reports for both discarded and lost. So remove discarded copies and remove lost copies. If I'm going to go ahead and click one of those, the discarded copies, and these 2 are pretty much managed the same, and you'll see one of the most important features of these utilities is it gives you the ability to remove items from a specific time period. So say, for example, you're wanting to remove discarded or lost copies from 5 to 3 years ago, something like that. You can specify that date here. That way you're holding on to the discarded or lost copies that may have gone into lost or discarded within this last year or 2, because it's possible you want to hold on to those in your system for a little bit longer. Now, if you're wanting to remove some type of group other than discarded or lost, we do have a remove copy utility here as well. Just remove copy is its term. This gives you the ability to kind of branch out and choose different selections to remove a specific group of items. A lot of folks find themselves removing a very specific barcode range or barcode list. Those are 2 of the more common select bys. And what's nice about a barcode list is once you've got this up, you can actually just scan barcodes into it. So, or you can scan them into a document other than this and copy and paste it over. All right. So that's some of the beginning things that you can do with the items in your collection. Of course, there may be other things that you guys may feel you want to do to clean it up at the end of the year. Definitely include those in your plans. All right, so we're kind of moving on to our patrons here. And before I do move on to patrons, let me just go to Seneca and see if there are any questions that have popped up that she feels would be good for us to address with the group. No? All right.
No questions so far.
Seneca is kicking butt and she's taking all the names. No questions to talk about. All right, guys. I must be just that thorough, I'm sure. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to patrons here. And you'll see for talking about patrons, we're going to speak specifically about cleaning up patron policies. So we're going to be going back to our policies for a moment. We're going to be advancing patrons, and we're also going to be removing graduated patrons. All right. So let's pop back to the program. All right, and we'll open up my preferences here. Okay, so cleaning up your patron policies can be a very important thing come the end of the year because there may be factors that you've noticed throughout the year that are happening where your people are interacting with the program or with their items in ways that you don't want. Or maybe you're wanting to alter or up transaction periods or maximum loan dates. To manage your patron policies, you'll first come under policies. And I would normally suggest starting with whatever the top policy is that you have or the lowest and kind of working your way down to keep it easy to remember. An important thing to remember about policies is just because you have different grades or you have different types of people, they don't necessarily have to have a policy per group or per grade. the more policies you add to the collection can essentially equal more work for you. So you do want to create policies that make your job easier but don't compound your work. The goal of a policy is to help you have a particular person or group act different within the program, such as a staff versus a student. A staff may have 2, 3, a month, however long transaction periods or time periods for checking out, and they may be able to check out 30 books. Whereas a student probably can only check out 3 and may have a 14-day transaction period. That's the goal of a policy, is to achieve things like that. Now, one other small thing to add as an addendum, stat groups can factor into that as well. So if you are wanting to collect unique numbers based on certain groups, you may possibly be creating policies for that reason. Otherwise, though, I wouldn't suggest getting too crazy with creating your patron policies. Keep it easy on yourself. Now, you are going to see that there are some policies, such as off to the right here, that may relate to specific groups off to the left, and they are under the items section. The reason we have these under items is because generally these particular policy types work better as item policies, but maybe you want them to be specific to this group. Anytime you're wanting to make a kind of an exception to the rule, you'll be using this exceptions button up in the top middle there. What you see here on left or right without the exceptions button is just the general rule for everybody regardless. Making an exception actually ties those two policies that are being displayed at that moment together and gives you the option to say they're going to act different from everyone else. But it's only them and none of the other policies. So say, for example, I want 7th grade to be able to check out my biographies in a maximum number of 5 for some reason. Maybe they've got special curriculum that includes that, but I can't have anybody else just going through and checking out too many biographies. That would give you an exception to that rule. It highlights it and gives you the ability to make your policies a little more dynamic. Now, after you've set up a policy, I normally suggest add it to a person and go and play with it and test it. Check books out to them. Make sure you make sure it feels comfortable to you. You don't want to get into the middle of the year and find out your policy isn't working the way you want it to. All right. So moving on from patron policies, we're going to go ahead and talk about advancing grades for your patrons. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and pop back to our main preference window. And under the main preference window, I'm going to go ahead and click on patrons here up at the top left. And once under patrons, you'll see grade table is off to the far right there. We'll go ahead and bring that up. And there is another way to manage advancements of grades other than this screen within the program, and it's a utility, which we'll take a look at here in a moment. But you can kind of do everything right through this screen here if that meets your needs. Now, for those of you folks who do kind of follow the Alexandria best practices that we've spoken about in our other workshops, this may not be a needed step in the process for you. This gives you folks who have the need to move people forward manually the ability to do that on your own. So if you're the kind of person that has to change all of the homerooms manually at the end of the year, you have to change all your policies manually at the end of the year, this is a big step for you as well. So, all right. Now, the most important thing to ensure with your grade table is that the list you've got here matches your grades in your school exactly. Once you've ensured that, then when you do any of your advancements of grades, it's going to follow this exact procedure here. Now, this can be handy for those of you who even do follow our best practices. So there can be some reports or other sorts throughout the system that will follow this list here. So it might behoove you to come here and set it up regardless. So you do want to make sure that this grade number or term that is in the grade column matches exactly what's under the patron's file. If this differs for any reason, then it won't be able to identify patrons who have that grade or are in that grade and be able to move them forward. Now, just to elaborate a little more clearly what I'm referring to, you see it says 6 there for my 6th grader. If I pop back here to my patrons and do a search for a 6th grader, you'll see I actually have 6th graders in there with 6 in their grade filled. So that's what it's pulling from. All right. Now, as long as that matches and everything looks good, once you're ready, you can advance all grades. And that's this button down at the bottom right here. Now, one last thing to consider before you do advance all grades is this last grade, graduated field that I've got here. The term can be anything that you want. We have graduated in there by default. But what this does is it moves the very last grade in that list out of any grade you've got in there and moves their term in their grade field to graduated. This is a very handy little feature that gives you the ability to identify that group of students who are no longer part of the student body any longer and have moved on. And with that selection of graduated, you can then run reports based on them. You can delete them as a group if you want, and a few other features. But once you hit advance all grades, it will remove everyone forward. Now, it may not look like it does a lot when you click it, but do make sure that you don't click it a bunch of times. It can happen. After you've clicked it once, pop back over to your patrons window and make sure that you see that your kids have actually moved forward and changed. So, but once that's done, one of the big next steps after that is getting rid of all those kids who are now in graduated or whatever other term that you've decided to call it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pop back over to our utilities because that's where we would do something like that. So popping back to circulation, then tools and utilities here. Now under utilities, I am going to go to the patrons section. Once under patrons, you see I have the option to remove patrons. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that utility. And down below, I've got a few selections that are already there. I'm just going to remove those so that I can set up my own selection and specify my own group. So I've clicked remove twice, and it's now all active patrons. I'm going to change my select by from all active patrons to grade here. Now that I've got the starting with and ending with fields up, I can specify graduated there. And now I'm requesting to remove patrons who have graduated in their grade field. So all those kids you just advanced, boop, you can get them out in one go. Now, a fun and cool little feature of this that is important to highlight at this moment is this always remove option. There will be some of you definitely who are going to have kids who aren't necessarily graduating from the district, or maybe you're still going to be seeing them somehow. You may want to hold on to those kids who have books that are still checked out or lost or overdue, or may have large fines. If that's the case, you want to leave always remove unchecked. If always remove is checked, it will remove all of your patrons regardless. So that way they're out of the system and any of their items that were lost or whatever will stay in that status but no longer be attached to the patron. Now it's important that if you are going to be removing all of your patrons, I would run any reports that you might need that will have that information available to you. So that way you're not losing that patron information before they're gone and out of the system. But generally if you're moving them, you want them gone regardless. So that's the general process of removing those patrons. All right. Now, last but not least, we've got an option for, we're going to talk about backing up your data and what to do if you are self-hosted and what to do if you are not. So this is going to kind of split y'all because we're going to be talking about specifics that may relate to some of you but not others, and vice versa. So what to do if you are self-hosted? If you are self-hosted, that means that somewhere either in your library itself or at your school or at a district level, your data is held. It's not managed by us, but it's managed there internally. If you're unaware if this is the case for yourselves, I would consult with the folks that help to set your account up with us. You're welcome to call and ask us, or maybe speak to a tech that works intimately with you with Alexandria. Now, if you are self-hosted and you yourself manage your data, I'm going to give you a few little tips and pointers to help you ensure that you're getting it backed up correctly for that year. That way, when you come back to the library, just in case someone performed, updates to your computers, removed your computer altogether and accidentally removed your library data, you will still have a copy. Now, one of the most important tools for you is a thumb drive or an external drive or a cloud drive. If you have something like that, you can back your data up there and have that set off to the side somewhere where won't be changed, so you'll make sure it'll be available for you next year. Alexandria can always be reinstalled easily or reset up quickly, but that data is absolutely the most important thing. It cannot be lost. So for those of you who aren't immediately aware, to access where your data would be, you're going to pop under Special here, and you're going to go under System Info, this sub-tab here. So Special and System Info. Once under there, you'll be able to see where your data is being saved. And it's pretty much in either one of these columns here. And once you get under there, you'll see software or a path. That's the location of your data. And for Macs and for Windows, that's different. And if you have more questions about where the path is, that's okay. We are actually going to be including in our FAQ that'll go out with the webinar a link that will give you more information about all those paths. That way you will have that accessible to you. But once you've identified that path, you're going to find your data at that location, and I'm gonna bring mine up for us all here together too, real quick. Sorry, I'm getting a little lag here on my side, guys. All right. All right, so you'll see what I'm doing is I'm just walking down that path here on a Mac. But for you guys, it may be slightly different. For most Macs, it's the same, but for your Windows versions, it will differ as well. Now you'll see in Alexandria version 6, you're always going to have this data folder that's here. That data folder is your live current data. You never want to play with your live current data if Alexandria is up and running. If Alexandria is closed down, then you're okay to move the data, but we normally suggest having it archived beforehand, so that way you're not going to be affecting that live data in any way. But if it's the end of the year, you probably have Alexandria shut down, you're good to go. Now, if you're going to be backing up Alex and its data, I would suggest also backing up your archives. Your archives are essentially copies of your data made at the date and time that you ran them. And they should all be labeled with that date and time. And so sometimes it's nice to have a couple extra copies just in case. It's better to have a wider safety net to catch yourself than a smaller one, always. So, and there's no harm in actually backing up this entire Alexandria support folder if you'd like, if you have enough room to do so. But once you've got that set on that hard drive, that external thumb drive or in the cloud drive, you guys should be all good and backed up. Now, for those of you who are cloud hosted or hosted by us, you can essentially avoid all that extra work. We do pretty much most of that for you. If you do have any questions or needs specific to that, definitely let us know. We can help you manage restores from that or anything that would be, but we hold on to it for you all summer long. So, well guys, we're kind of coming up near to the end of our topics that we had today. I'm gonna go ahead and have Seneca put up a poll for us that we're going to be able to fill out. And that's going to just solicit some general information from you regarding end of year procedures. We'd like to hear some of your thoughts, so please feel free to share. And then after that, we'll jump in and we'll do our Q&A, all right? All right, everybody, take a moment and help us get a little data. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for your patience. Didn't mean to leave you hanging there. The webinar the workshop's very closely over. We just wanted to give everybody time to kind of fill out that poll and offer a little bit of information. But we do have some questions here that we do want to go through and share. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Seneca relay questions that you guys have offered that probably are best answered in the group. So Seneca, what's a good first question that we can talk to?
Ellen would like to know where she can go to learn more about our best practices.
That is a perfect question, Ellen. Thank you for asking. So Ellen wants to know where she can go for more best practices. Ellen, we're going to include in our FAQ that goes out with the email that you're going to get that's going to have a link to the recorded webinar, a whole bunch of good links and information for you that will help you find all those best practices. And we'll have a few different things in there that will have more information even than what we've shared today. So thank you, Ellen. That is a perfect question. All right.
And Sharon would like to know if she can get a certificate for this webinar.
Oh, I love it. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, we love that folks have interest in being able to show that they've accomplished these things and they have, more information from what we've offered. Ellen, we will probably, Sharon, sorry, we'll probably be offering something like that. We'll have to get it out to you guys through that email that we'll be sending out, or get more information to you through that. So definitely be looking for that.
And then with the data backup, from Finder, were we going to documents, or could you just walk through that, where they can find on a Mac their data?
Yeah, definitely. So let me go ahead and walk you back through those steps so that you can see on a Mac where you back your data up from. So the easiest way that I find oftentimes, if I don't have my Finder window set up to show me where my actual computer is, or my drive. So normally you might have that here on this left side in your Finder window. If you don't have that, then I'll make sure I click on my desktop, and it'll just show this same toolbar here, such as the Apple Finder, and I'll click on Go. And under Go, I will go to Computer. And if you like hotkeys, make note that there is the Mac hotkeys for that too. Once under my computer, you will almost always have the link to your main hard drive that's there. And that's my 240 GB SSD. Yours might say something different like HD or Mac HD. But when you click on that, you should see these common 5 folders that are pretty much on all Macs, users being one of them. I'm going to go ahead and click on users there. Once under users, you're going to click on shared. Under shared, generally there is just library, so you're kind of just following that path down. Under library is application support, and then you'll see Alexandria support. If you find yourself with a folder that says Alexandria librarian support, that means, such as this one is here, that means that you found the support folder for one of your client stations, and that will not have data in it. So you do want to make sure you're going to the Alexandria support folder. And I would normally suggest, take a look at maybe the dates of your archives, and make sure the dates of your archives are up to date. Mine obviously are not. I haven't ran one recently. And if the dates of your archives are up to date, maybe even run one just to help, before you get to this location. That'll help you to know that you're definitely finding your current support folder that you're using. Because sometimes folks may have, different paths set up that they were using at one time and have begun using a different one. It happens. And unfortunately, sometimes there's no way for us to accommodate for all of that as a possibility. So you might need to be a little careful and do a little sleuthing. But I would say run an archive before you get here and check to make sure that you see that archive here, the new one with current date and time. So, but that's the path for Macs. Like I said, I will make sure that we will be sending out a link to you guys that will have all of those paths detailed for current systems that we support. So any other questions you have past that, please let us know. All right, Seneca, what do we have for more questions?
Okay, so this is not something that we touched on, but I do think a lot of people will find it helpful, is how to keep items that are showing up as lost or discarded, how to not have those shown on Researcher.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about that for sure, guys. Okay, so let me switch my mental gears here real quick. What we're going to do is we're going to pop under Edit, and we're going to go to Preferences here. And the question, just to kind of re-emphasize it for everybody, oftentimes you're going to not want to have your lost or discarded or other status typed items showing up in the Researcher collection that people are able to see because they can't use them. And you don't want to get their hopes up, etc. So I'm going to show you how to make sure those are turned off so that they're not showing up. All right. So now that I'm under preferences, I'm going to go ahead and pop under researcher here. And once under researcher, I'm going to choose from the list on the left this researcher option. Now under here, you'll see a number of tabs. The fifth one to the right is called auto hide. You're going to want to select that. Once under auto hide, don't skip reading some of this, because this will help describe kind of what you're going through, what you're doing. So especially for those of you who aren't immediately familiar with this feature, take the time to do your research. But it essentially accomplishes the goal of what I mentioned earlier. And you'll see here you can specify which particular status types you would actually like to have not show in the researcher. Once those are selected, I would suggest probably doing a program restart. So shut Alex down and restart it. So that way things in the researcher will begin to show or not show based on what you've specified. But normally a restart probably would be the best way to go to kind of help push that to all the data. So yeah. All right, Seneca, was that a good job? Did I answer that question well?
Yeah,
Perfect.
definitely.
What else do we have?
Emily would like to know about how long would we think it takes to close down the library for a first-year librarian if they don't have any of those procedures already in place.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great question. You know, honestly, Emily, it can be as simple as what we did today if you don't really have many procedures in place and don't have any other ideas about what you want to be doing. That is discluding inventory, though. Inventory can be one of the biggest kind of time sucks, if you will, for you know, what your end of year procedures. If you've got a fairly large collection, then you know that it just ramps up the time that you'll be spending on the inventory, because inventory basically is you going up and down the shelves and scanning each book physically one by one so that you can then prove to Alexandria, essentially, that it does exist in the collection. And so I'm sure you can imagine the time that that would take. Now, I've known folks to go without doing inventory, you know, for a year or two or longer. So it's not unheard of. And you can also, as you get more familiar with the program, you can set up the plan to actually run inventory throughout the year, kind of section by section. That can be a little harder to manage or remember, because you have to really stay on top of what you have inventoried and what you haven't. But that helps to break inventory down into smaller groups so that you're not doing it all in one big batch. But other than that, yeah, I mean, these end of year procedures can be accomplished probably in, you know, half an hour into an hour. If you have any further questions, definitely let us know, but you're going to see that documentation go out with our FAQ. You'll find a lot of extra tips and tricks and suggestions in there that might help you to better prepare a plan and help you get a better idea of how long it would take. So, but let us know if you need anything, please. All right. What else do we have to talk
about? Another one we didn't mention, a lot of people are probably thinking about upgrading or switching to Alexandria 7. Where can they get more information about that?
Great question. Yeah, so guys, if you're wanting to get more information about switching over to Alexandria version 7, I would say one of the first things to do is call into support. Yeah, call into support and talk to one of our support representatives. They'll be able to answer your specific questions that are a little bit more technically oriented and begin to explain to you the changes that are going on from version 6 to version 7. They're also going to have you perform a few little things, you know, to make sure that you are comfortable and ready, because we don't want to give you a new program that does act and look a little different without you being fully prepared. That's the most important thing. So if you are thinking about switching, that's my biggest piece of advice. Make sure you feel absolutely comfortable before you switch. You know, you don't want to make that decision and get there and feel like you don't like it or you don't want to. And it's important for us to note that version 7 is still kind of a growing thing. So if you do get in and you try out our demo and you play with it and you go, golly, I like it, but I really wish there was this, please be vocal. Please let us know. We are making changes based on your input, and we would love to hear your thoughts, and we will do our best to apply them as we can. So, any other things on that, Seneca, that would be helpful?
I think I'm just finishing up a couple here that are more specific to people's data. So I think we should be good to go unless anyone else has any questions that they want to submit.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, guys, we didn't have a super long one today. But I do want to sincerely thank you all very much for joining us. Seneca, in a moment here, is going to be putting through a link for a survey that you can fill out, which will give you guys the ability to give us a little bit more specific feedback than, say, just other than the poll we passed on. This, of course, will also be our last workshop of the year. So we will be starting up new workshops next year. So, I mean, you guys just go enjoy your summer and don't worry about having to listen to anything we're saying. Of course, once your end of year procedures are done. But yeah, thanks everyone for a great year of attending the workshops and taking part and giving us feedback and, making Alexandria a great program. We love having you as part of our family. All right, so unless there's any other questions that do pop up, I'm going to go ahead and go on mute here and let Seneca finish up some of the other questions. And for those of you who want to go, you can go. Just wait for that email to come through and the FAQ and that other information to show up for you. Seneca and I noticed that there are a number of questions that are related to the transition from version 6 to version 7. What we will make sure to do is to include some good, thorough information in that FAQ that we'll be sending out, which will give you a more detailed rundown of how that's going to work and what it's going to look like. It'll have a link to the demo that you can use. That way you guys can access that and give it a try. All right? Okay, thanks very much.